Drop it on the random.
What up, y'all? Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast Reviews. And today, we're going to review a brand new album from Jadakiss, legend in the hip hop game. The name of the album is Ignatius. Now, I know I suffered a lot on several podcasts trying to pronounce that word, but let alone not a word, a name of Ice Pick J, his man who passed away, man and business partner. I say that passed away. So Jadakiss put out an album largely dedicated to the memory of his friend. Now, before we can review this album, we gotta go back and look at what is the legacy of a Jadakiss solo project. So in 2001, he released his debut album. Finally, if you ask me, highly anticipated, long awaited, the 2001 Kiss the Game Goodbye was his debut album. A lot of people loved it, including myself. This was also around the time where there was all the beef, so it was Jadakiss and Beanie Siegel. The album had a couple of joints on there like Knock Yourself Out for the Radio, Show Discipline featuring Nas, We Gonna Make It, classic Back and Forth with Styles P, and a couple of other joints there on there, especially the joint that featuring DMX, that set off the Beanie Siegel and Jadakiss beef. So classic album to many, but not to all. And I don't know if I could call it a classic. To me, if you're gonna say classic is 5 out of 5, I'm probably giving this album a 4.5, maybe even a 4, because for everything dope on here that I named, there are a couple of tracks that I have a legacy of skipping. But then he followed that up with the 2004 release, Kiss of Death, which was a much more commercial album from Kiss, but he still kind of kept the bars going. He had a lot of guest features on there: Nate Dogg, Snoop Dogg, Anthony Hamilton, Mariah Carey, Pharrell, Kanye was on there, obviously Sheek Louch, Styles P, Eminem was on there. Probably commercially his biggest album, and unfortunately probably set the tone for every album that came after that. In 2009, he released his album The Last Kiss, which, if you ask me, was even more features, even more records like geared towards the radio, not meaning that I had to dislike them, but the guest features is ridiculous on here. There's a lot of them, like Neo's on here, Ghostface and Raekwon's on here, Jasmine Sullivan, Pharrell, Styles P, Jeezy, Mary J. Blige, Swiss Beats, and OJ the Juice Man. Y'all remember him? And then he released like a mixtape called I Love You in 2011. It was called A Dedication to My Fans. And that had a lot of R&B feel to it, with a lot of guest appearances again. And then probably most recent before this one was 2015. He released Top Dead or Alive, and I was convinced before this album came out, like, yo, Jadakiss is trying to get back on them bars. And this album is dope, but it's spotty, because there's a lot on here that's dope, and then there's a lot that's worthy of skipping. And again, there are a lot of features on here: Future, Diddy, even though Diddy not really rapping, and I really like that song. It's called You Don't Eat. Akon's on here, Neo, Nipsey Hussle, Wiz Khalifa, Sheik, obviously, Young Buck, Nas is on here also. And that brings us to today, 2020, Ignatius. Jadakiss releases another album. Jadakiss is not a releasing album every other year type cat, as you can tell by the dates I gave you. He takes about 4 or 5 years before he releases an album. This album has 13 tracks, and again features a ton of artists: Pusha T, Ty Dolla $ign's on here, 2 Chainz, Rick Ross and Imani, Dej Loaf, Nino Man, John Legend. And to kind of sum up what I feel about this new album from Jadakiss, I'd be repeating myself. Again, this is another album from Jadakiss that shows that that sophomore album and the success, the radio success he saw off of it, is kind of become his formula. This album is no different. Yes, are you going to get Jadakiss from the Locks and back in the mixtape days? Yes, some of that is on here. But you're going to get way more of the R&B hooks, of the, the not so street hardcore tracks that you might be accustomed to. But that's the funny part. That's the key right there, accustomed to. When I think about this album, having listened to it 3 times already, again, where are your expectations before you hit play? There are many Jadakiss fans, including myself, but I'm a Jadakiss fan that realized after his 3rd album that if it ain't a mixtape, this is the formula he's always going to do. Why? Because he's obviously found success in doing this. He's not going to give you 13 tracks of straight boom bap hardcore records. He's just not. You'd be lucky if you get 5 of those. You're going to get him on the album, but it's not going to be the sum of its parts. His success has been in collaboration with it artists to make what some would call radio singles. Now, is that such a bad thing? I don't think so. But I think it's bad when you have expectations that date back to the late 90s, right? You're expecting all the things you like about Jadakiss from the 90s to appear on future albums, and every time he drops, you're disappointed. Why? Because your expectations are higher, or not even higher. Your expectations are in a different place from where he is, right? Jadakiss hasn't been Kiss the Game Goodbye album dropper since his sophomore release. That was 2004. And even on that album is where he set the standard for what his albums were going to be. Now, there's some who may feel like this one was, the worst of them all. It really was heavy on the R&B side. And I just have to ask you, are you listening to some of the lyrics? I expected this album to be a little bit heavy on that side of sound-wise, only because it was dedicated to a good friend of his that passed away. To me, that sets the tone. It's the same thing with Common's last album. People's expectations was in a different place when this dude made an album based off of his memoir. It's almost guaranteed that it's going to have a different sound, unless you're telling a gangster story the entire time, or maybe your friend who passed was like, yo, I hate when you make radio singles and you decided to just make all street tracks. Sure, but there's probably 3 records on here that I counted where he's exclusively talking about his friend and the memory of his friend, and the music is I guess some would say more somber, but it's just not boom bap, and it really shouldn't be. Now, sure, could there have been better beats? That's subjective, whether you like the beats or not. Honestly, I'm listening for songs. Again, this dude been putting out solo albums since 2001, along with mixtapes, along with the collaboration with him and Fabulous. I don't have those kind of expectations for Kiss. That kind of left a long time ago. Even with his debut album, there was a lot to be desired there. Even though there was some crazy records on there, but I think it's the beats. I think people want to hear Jada over certain beats. His voice, his flow, the way he approaches the track just sounds magical over hardcore beats. The problem with that is it's his prerogative what he wants to make. Does it make it whack? I don't know. That's an opinion piece. Did he get a little heavy on, tracks dedicated to his homie? Well, how can I say that when it's named after him. You know what I'm saying? So I can only expect what this man has shown me. And listening through to the album, right? There's one thing that is my personal gripe that I'm not even gonna front, that he's done several times throughout his career that drove me nuts, and that's him writing his bars around a sample, right? When it was dope is when he did the song Why. But on this album, it's the song called Me, and it's another track where he does that also. I think it's tired, right? Is there somebody, I mean, maybe feel like he mastered it or whatever the case may be. I don't know. Maybe that's why he keeps doing it. Maybe there's a certain sect of fans it's like, yo, where that sample call out rhyme. Like, I don't like those records because there's no smoke and mirrors with him. You just know that he's just filling gaps to get to the next, sample pause. And it drives me nuts sometimes, but that's not the sum of the album. Hunting Season, hands down my favorite record on here, featuring Pusha T. Very dope. But this album is really quick at the same time, and I could see why some fans could be mad, because if Jade is coming out with a new album and you feel like maybe this time he's going to put out something that's hardcore, and you get to the end and you realize towards the end, because especially towards the end, you done heard a bunch of singing, you're going to feel some kind of way because it's over. You know what I'm saying? But again, I feel like if you're a fan of Jadakiss from the Locks, from his solo albums all throughout his career, you're really going to like this album. I think I'm one of those people. I have my gripes about his albums. I always feel like they never lived up to what I thought they should. But I never really disliked all of them. You know what I'm saying? I like some I skip a lot, some I don't. And I feel like Ignatius is a really good album for what it is, for what was planned. And I feel like if you are really into Jadakiss because you think he's one of the nicest on the mic, and you love, what he's done with the Locks, and you love what he did on the mixtape side, and even what him and Fabulous put out, you're gonna be disappointed because it's not that Jadakiss. You gotta wait till he decides he's gonna do a mixtape to get that Jadakiss, and maybe that's a bad thing, maybe that's a good thing, who knows. But at the end of the day, I think Jadakiss has always been clear in his solo releases as to what his goal is, and if it wasn't working, he wouldn't keep doing it. So it's working with somebody. Now, is this something I'm like, yo, top 5 of the year, one of the best ever, probably classic? Not at all. I don't know how long this album is going to stay on my rotation. It all depends on, naturally how often I hit play on it when I'm looking for something to listen to. Right now, yeah, it's in the rotation, but who knows if it will stay there. What do you think about Jadakiss's brand new album, Ignatius? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Subscribe to the podcast, which is available everywhere you listen to podcasts. All you got to do is search for Hip Hop Now Podcast and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and most importantly, share this with people enjoy this kind of content. Support the movement at patreon.com/hiphopnow. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.